Welcome back, food enthusiasts, to another episode of the Food Marketing Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Holden Rouse, and today's adventure takes us to the dynamic world of social media marketing and strategic brand storytelling. Buckle up, because alongside me is my co-host, Doug Resch, who's ready to sprinkle his food marketing expertise into the mix.
Absolutely, Holden. This episode promises to be knowledge for the senses. We're diving deep into the art of crafting brand narratives that sizzle, pop, and leave a lasting impression. And guess what? Our special guest today is none other than Rachel Helmer, the mastermind behind Blume Creative. At Blume, they blend strategy, creativity, and a dash of digital wizardry to make brands shine brighter. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're pleasure to be with here today.
Yes.
So let's jump right into it a little bit on the influencer marketing. You're obviously a creative strategist when it comes to influencer marketing. How do you approach finding the right influencers? You know, food brands, they really want to create strategy, and I think building this criteria of what to consider, how to select influencers, really to collaborate with in brands. How do you start with that?
Yeah, so influencers can be a very impactful marketing strategy in social media marketing. And the first place you want to start is kind of where you would start with anything, is really getting a solid grip on your brand story and your audience as well, because that's really going to dictate everything, including the type of influencers that you want to work with. Once you have that dialed in really tight, you can then go back and look at, well, if this is my story and this is my audience, who are these people looking at in the digital world on social media? And that's going to really guide you as you search for the right influencers. And, you know, you might look at an influencer and be like, oh my gosh, they have like so many followers. This is a great fit. But unless your audience is looking at them, it's not really going to translate. And so really finding where your people are, what sort of digital content they're taking in, and then placing your content there. That's kind of the good place to start, I think.
I appreciate that insight. And I think the difference between, there's a lot of trends of go big with these 1.5 million followers or more, right? Versus potentially a micro influencer campaign that might be more beneficial because, as you said, you're looking at where does your audience view and which influencers are they working with, right? So I think that's a good strategy to look at.
Yeah, and that smaller group may have a following that even cares more, that what the micro influencer is doing is more specifically catered to them, right?
Completely, yeah. You don't necessarily have to be with the influencer with the most followers. You just need the right influencer. And if they have a very tight, macro or even micro following, I think that can convert even more. Is someone that, say you are like a food event and you are trying to get your event out there and get more eyes on it. Going with an influencer that specifically you can see they're attending events and they're around food or beverage and they have a really engaged audience when they're posting their content. You can see not only are they putting out beautiful visual content that aligns with sort of your vision of what the look of your brand is, but also they have people asking questions. Where is this event? Oh my gosh, this is great. I've always wanted to go. You really want those people, because when that person, if you align with them, ends up posting about your event, you're going to get those questions, which ultimately will lead to conversion for you.
Mm-hmm. And I think working with influencers, you got to talk a little bit about content strategy. So can you share some of the successful content strategy you've had with maybe a food brand, and how you balance sort of like a promotional post versus something that's more engaging and value driven?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think if we're looking at the realm of an influencer, so you're creating this partnership with an influencer with it's kind of a twofold purpose. Like, you're wanting to get your message out there and reach their audience. But additionally, they're going to be creating content that ideally, if you scope out your contract with the influencer properly, you're then going to have access to this content that you can use ongoing. So if it, again, go back to the example of the event, if this is a food event that you're having every year, obviously you're going to use it that year to drive traffic to that event. But then the following years as well, you're going to repurpose that content. And that's something you're going to want to bake into your contract with the influencer. What are the terms of that usage? Making sure you can use it year after year. Is there any kind of notation that has to happen in terms of providing credit each time it's used? Really ironing out all those details ahead of time is going to serve you as you go forward into months and years of using this content going forward.
And so do you see a follow-up question on that? Do you see a big difference in terms of micro-influencers and macro-influencers leaning towards different variations within their contracts as well?
It varies from influencer to influencer. Sometimes they never use contract. They're like, oh, you want to use a contract? And others are very well versed in it. I'm like one of those very hyper or organized people. And so I always like to have all the details and everything stitched up perfectly. I feel like it only serves you going forward. That way, in the future, there's not questions of like, are we allowed to use this? How are we supposed to use this? Who needs credit? Like, just take care of all those details ahead of time. And a lot of times, I think even when I've had an influencer that's not super familiar with doing a contract, they appreciate it because they're like, you're actually looking out for my, what's good for me as well. It's a way of saying like, we're making sure we're getting what we need out of this partnership, but we really want the influencer as well to feel like we're honoring them and giving them value in turn.
I think that's a great way of putting together professional contracts of just what it is in the outright of what you're talking through, right? I think that's key to any relationship, right? And moving forward and knowing, okay, exactly what point, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is what we talked about, and then you have all of the basics of covering between the micro details of, like you said before, the platforms being used, and then also how often you can use it, and all of the indemnification that comes with
and where it
contracts.
can be used. Where it can be used is specific too, because a lot of times people are like, it's social's okay, but don't put that on your website. So make sure you iron out anything you might want to use that content in the future, and just getting clarity between all parties. And when I say contract, it doesn't have to be like, this is a super legal binding contract. We're like signing in blood. It's like, it could just be a scope, and everyone's agreeing, this is the scope. We're all this is how we're gonna play together. Essentially.
No, I love that. So let's talk a little bit about navigating a big piece of social media's algorithms, right? They changed a lot, and they're constantly evolving throughout the process. Google in and of itself does a lot of algorithms on websites, but then Instagram, et cetera. So how do you stay ahead of that algorithm to catch maximum reach within customers, and then working with the influencers to try drive engagement from your clients as well?
Yeah, that is a big part of it, is those algorithms. Social media in general is ever changing, and that's one of the number one things when we get someone that comes to us that's looking for a partner to help with social media is, I just can't stay on top of all this. It's like I figure it out and then it changes like 5 minutes later. Like, it's too much. I can't do my business and stay on top of all these things that we have to do to stay in the game. And so it's a multifaceted process. Continuous learning. Honestly, it's one of the reasons why I love social media so much, is because it's so dynamic and changing. Like, I feel like you are always having to learn new things, which I love. And so the way we do that, there's a lot of different ways. It's a lot of research, subscribing to different newsletters. Honestly, at this point in our career, we have worked with so many different social media management platforms, and they all have really good newsletters that come out that stay on top of all these changes in social media. So 2 of them that I read weekly are Sprout Social and Hey Orca. Those are 2 different social media management platforms, and you don't have to be a part of them to subscribe to the newsletter. Obviously, they're going to pitch you on their platform in it, but you get so many gems of like what's happening in the news and social media, what is like might be happening, and from there you can dig deeper into research. And they have whole teams that are doing this research on the daily. And so being able to dig into that and then take it from there and do your own research has a lot of value. I was gonna say, following the social media platforms, as silly as it sounds too, is really valuable. So all of the social platforms, they have their own social platforms, or Instagram has their own, and the people that work at those platforms have their own channels. Follow them. A lot of times it's stuff that's not super interesting, but there's gems headed in there. that again can send you on a search to figure out what's the next thing that's happening. And then we have on our team internally, we always task one of our team members with monthly providing a what's new in social as well and doing our own dig. So between those three things, you can kind of stay on top of. And that's something we always provide to our clients as well, as we'll give them these gems that we've learned and then offer it as an option. Like, we're seeing this, maybe we should pivot and change our strategy to see if this helps us or not.
I think that's a great piece of advice. I mean, no one knows how the platform works better than the people creating it, right? So yeah,
Totally.
I like that.
Yeah, utilizing the
Totally.
experts of the platform itself, and then, like you said, using that teach the teacher platform, right, where you guys become the experts through their experts, and then teach your clients, and so everybody's learning all of the facets of A/B testing in a way, right? So,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And I think we could even tie this now into some of the user-generated content, going a step from the micro-influencers now the users. What are your friends and family doing? So this can be a gold mine for brands. And how does a brand encourage customers to create content and share that content about products that they love?
Yeah. No, UGC is an amazing asset to have for getting more content and really also tapping into that authenticity piece that has always been, but I feel like even more so is important on social now. And your path for using UGC kind of depends on where you are in your social media journey. If you're just getting started as a brand and putting your content out in the digital sphere, then you're going to want to focus efforts on getting the brand out there and encouraging customers to share things with hashtag campaigns or challenges and contests to get people to share for some kind of like incentive, a prize or a discount or an offer. Influencers are another great place to start when you're first getting your brand out there, partnering with them just sort of to move things along and expand your reach. When you're just getting started and you don't have a massive following, being able to tap into those strategic influencer followings to sort of raise the awareness around your brand is really valuable. But if you're at a point where you're kind of further along in your social media journey and you already have a fairly established brand, you can definitely tap into things like creating campaigns around what sort of content do you want to see. There already might be people posting about your product online if you're fairly established, but maybe you want to see your product or your restaurant in a certain way, creating a specific challenge around that to try and encourage people to share that content. And then offering, for the best content that's shared, we will feature this, offering to do that has a powerful motivator for people that want to get more exposure on their end as well.
No, I think that's great. And I think, the big part of the UGC is being able to tell the right story, right? And so building that storytelling momentum, food, beverages, they have a really deep emotional connection with audiences, right? So trying to bring in memories and building all the connection with your brand, right, I think is key. So how do you leverage that in social media beyond UGC, right? Building that story. Is there any favorite brands that you've worked with that you could talk about in terms of what they've done well, connecting with audiences, how you've built stories around specific content that would generate well within the audience in social media?
Yeah, I think, and I mentioned this earlier, but authenticity really is king on social media, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. And so being able to authentically share your story and have transparency. And it helps if you have a good story to tell. And I've been fortunate enough to only work with brands that have that. So I guess I'm lucky in that facet. But yeah, just sharing that story transparently. And that can relate to everything from like origin stories. Like, does your brand have a really cool story of like, how were we motivated to start this? What was the driving purpose behind it? Is it something related to the founder? Is it something related to there was this deep need we saw in our community, in our world, and we wanted to fulfill it? And people appreciate that because everyone has those feelings about things in their life. So it's relatable in that sense. I think visual storytelling is really big too. So when you're telling these compelling emotional like tie-in stories, having visuals that will meet that copy. And that's really always been the balance with most social media, is having like, you're going to have this really rich copy that tells a story, but you need to pull your visuals up to that level, whether it be stills or video or a combo of both. For me, I know you'd asked about an example. One that I've loved working with is an oyster company called Sanctuary Oysters in Sol Azul, and they are in the El Viscano Biosphere Reserve in Baja. And part of their brand story is that these oysters are raised by whales because they are developed in this pristine ecosystem that's just like a beautiful natural habitat, and the whales come every year to breed. And so literally the oysters are growing in this protected area adjacent to where baby whales are swimming and starting a new life. And it's such a beautiful story, and everything that they've done to help support sustainable seafood in Baja and support the farming community, the sea farming community, and provide a beautiful life for the people that live there as well. And they're completely transparent about that. And so when we share in blogs and on social, showing people like working on the farm and showing them all eating together and taking days off and having this beautiful life, it's true. Like we're not doing something that's not actually happening in real life. And I think the trick is to like be able to show authentically in the imagery and posting that this is actually happening. And yes, that's been a really special experience for me to be a part of.
I love that. I think the other part that I think might be key is charitable foundations as well, right? Or charitable giving, right? That's key to a lot of people, right? They want to know what charitable causes that, or gift giving, something like that you have available too, right? And I think that's big. Yeah, I agree, and I think you and I worked together on my previous company too, was with the farm, right? Is being able to talk about on the farm where the fruit came from, showing that from a photography perspective, videography, social media platforms, I think is just key, right? Because you could resonate with, okay, this is how my fruit is grown and this is what I'm going to ingest, right? And it's organic, and you can actually see the farmers, you can see the machinery, you can see how the fruit was grown on trees, etc., and the longevity of that, right? So telling that story, I think, is really key piece of marketing.
Yeah, I think these days people want to see mission-driven brands, and they want to see you doing that mission. And I think social media is a great place to leverage and show the world what you're doing, right?
Great.
Yeah. I think on the complete opposite side of that, we've got crisis management.
True.
So sometimes social media crisis happens. So how do you handle negative feedback or PR challenges for food brands while maintaining their reputation?
I think that's a good part of any campaign on negative feedback, right? Understanding that negative feedback, they're voicing their feedback for a reason, right? And most of the time they want change, right? And so that just accepting that and understanding that negative feedback is good feedback as well, right? And working within the confines of maintaining your reputation, but that not overstepping yourself. You see that sometimes in like Yelp reviews or what have you, where a business owner decides they have to respond, but then sometimes that response becomes negative in and of itself, right? And so just like you said, absorbing that and saying, okay, look, this person has a problem or feedback of some sort. Let's figure out how to manage this. And then we've been in an instance where sometimes, where negative publicity is good publicity, right? And so just recognizing that as well is not always negative is negative. And then with bots as well, right? Bots in social media can probably be another challenging aspect of negative feedback, or the people that want to just have a negative comment because they know it's going to drive likes or or the social sharing or whatnot, right? And so just managing through all that process is probably key from your aspect.
People that just woke up and decided to choose chaos.
Exactly.
There's a lot of that, and unfortunately one of the hazards of growing in social media, and as you get a bigger following and more engaged following, you're going to get some of this negative too. And so really being able to sort out what of that is authentic, there's an actual problem that we need to address, and what is just someone that's just not a nice person or not a nice bot.
Right.
And trying to properly respond. Sometimes if it's like a spam or a bot, and there's a lot of that, particularly when you turn on the advertising engine, is learning the protocol for like handling that, which is, reporting it, hiding it, sometimes banning, a bot or a person. And then when do we need to actually take it up the ladder and call Meta, and if it's on Meta, call them and speak to them about like what's being done about this. It's filtering out what's real and not real in terms of crisis too is important.
I agree with that. So we talked a little bit about algorithms earlier, and I'd like to talk about emerging platforms, right? And so I think there's a lot of social media platforms or trends that are happening, and obviously within our confines of age, there's younger demographics that tend to know a lot more in regards to brand new platforms or influencers that are happening, right? So how do you evaluate whether a new platform is worth investing in? And then also, is there any ones that you're excited about at the moment for food marketing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton that are coming out constantly, a lot of small platforms. And, it's a lot to take in, but it kind of falls into that first bucket we talked about where we're monitoring the algorithm, we're monitoring all these new things that are coming out. And with any platform that you go on, whether it's a new one that's coming out or existing, the key now, I think in the past, people were like, I have to be on all the things and like do all the things. And, that's just what we need to do. But what we've really seen in the past year or so is that's not the right protocol. Like you really need to go back to your brand story, your audience, find out where your people are, and that's where you should be, and don't go anywhere else. Like put 100% into the platforms you're on, where your people are, and you really want to take time to like research and figure out where your audience is, whether that's on TikTok or Instagram or X, Twitter, LinkedIn, like figuring out where your people are, and then full scale put all your effort in there. And as new things come up, we can evaluate those and decide, what is the ROI on this? Do we really see this as something that, we're going to put X amount of time into investing content and visual and building it? Are we seeing a return there or not? Or should we just keep pushing all of our stuff into these existing buckets we have? So I think really making sure you evaluate those is key. I haven't seen any platforms right now that I'm really feeling strongly about. There's a lot of like small groups coming out. One that I go back to is, I remember when Clubhouse first came out, I think it was during COVID, and we had a lot of clients that were like, we have to get on this. We're ready to be on it, full on it. And, really it was looking at, okay, so what does it take to be on this? you need to be very comfortable speaking, and you need to be in a lot of groups and providing content. And when we came back to most of those clients, they were like, well, I don't really want to talk, and I don't have time to do that. So it's partly like, do you have the ability and the interest in putting into this what it's going to take to be successful? And yeah, I think with any new platform that comes out, analyzing it and deciding like if it's worth your effort.
That's great advice. I think there are many different options out there that are always coming out up, and you never know when's the right time to jump on board, because you don't want to be late to the party, right?
Right.
You want to be an early user, but at the same time, it's got to make sense for your brand.
Yeah.
And I think this can kind of go into the next question with collaborations and partnerships. So how can food brands, which they often work with other businesses and other influencers, what's the best approach when forming a successful partnership that can benefit both parties?
Yeah, I think, this is sort of in the same vein as working with influencer and finding those right partnerships that you can work with as a food brand. So say, you're a chocolate chip company and you have this amazing chocolate chip line, and you're looking to do a collaboration. You could partner with someone like, a really great artisanal butter, or also maybe bring in someone that has these beautiful sheet pans, like thinking about like, again, going back to who is our audience? What are they doing? What are they taking in? Well, obviously, if you're chocolate chips, you probably are working with people that love baking. Maybe it's a mom that likes to make cookies, or it's someone that's just really into entertaining. So thinking about like what else aside from chocolate chips do these people like? They're probably buying the cookie sheets, they're buying flour, they're buying butter. And then on that, once you have the list of like what are these core things, like product wise, finding companies that align with your brand values. So if you're like an artisanal chocolate chip, then you're probably with an artisanal type butter, and with a more elevated pan that someone's gonna like because it's beautiful and it photographs well. And then doing your outreach to these companies that are in line with your values and bringing them on board for a partnership, whether that be something where you're aligning with an influencer and providing them with the pan and the chocolate chips and the butter and having them make this beautiful recipe and then share a photo shoot and a video shoot where everyone's being tagged in the collaboration. Everyone's getting these assets at the end of the collaboration that they have then agreed upon the terms of how everyone can share it going forward. Or maybe it's a giveaway that's tied into that where someone's winning the package with all these products. So there's lots of different ways you can partner where, again, you're making sure it's mutually beneficial for all parties involved, and everyone's very clear on the terms of the partnership, how we can all benefit together going forward.
Well, that's a good segue into, I think, a follow-up question for me is, you and I have worked together on some photography work within the food realm of things as well. So
Yes.
Food and beverage obviously plays a huge role in terms of marketing, and the consistency of that across platforms is key, right? So how do you showcase this diversity within food products from food photography? Like what's your normal go-to, or what do you recommend photography versus video, all of the fun elements that come with that?
Yeah, I think starting with a really good style guide. So this sort of folds into like where we began, having that brand story firmly established. Your style guide is part of that. Social media is so visual, and so you really want to, before you start kicking off posting, have that in place of like, this is the color palette of what we work with, consistent angles, lighting and angles that we may use. Having, if you don't have any images yet, using stock images to create a mood board that we can then base photo shoots off of. Another great thing to have is consistent props and backgrounds that we might use. Have a set of examples that you're gonna provide for your photographer to use that align with your brand's look and style guide. And then if you're using certain editing, having set filters and tools, and having this all documented ahead of time in something that can then be provided to your photographer, whether it's the same photographer you're working with or you have different photographers on different shoots, giving that to them so they then have a starting point to start to build that content off of, whether it's photographs or video. And then you always want to also make sure this is tied across beyond just social media. So I would say if someone's looking at your social media and your website, we want there to be a cohesiveness there in terms of style so that there's the same brand look story being provided.
I think that's key in regards to wanting to make sure that there's consistency across the platforms and that food photography as well. And I think maintaining that visual consistency is a key element that people don't understand when it comes to social media platforms, and then also the photography and the video element. So, yeah.
And it's subtle sometimes. It's like you might not at first glance notice it, but in terms of the psychology behind marketing, if it's off, people are going to notice. They're not going to notice why they think something's off, but it's going to trigger something in them.
And the other piece of that too, I think, where brands need to recognize is that the more information they give a photographer or a stylist upfront, right? It's a lot of work sometimes to put together a list of here's the shots that I want, and here it's going to reduce the time associated with an artist to do their job, right? And the photographer sometimes has to set up, and it may eliminate 3 to 4 hours worth of food photographer styling because you're not on site trying to figure it out, right? It's beforehand, this is what we're trying to look at, this is the visual elements that we want to achieve, and then like you said, the brand style guide is a key part of that as well.
Yeah, the style guide. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I agree with everything Doug says. That's all.
I do too. He's very smart.
He's okay.
Yeah. No, the style guide is like the top of the pyramid, and then you're going to have your photo shoots, and each photo shoot might be a little different because your campaigns are going to be different. And it depends how detailed you want to get. But in a perfect world, I think you would have your style guide, and then you would have your guide for each shoot where you're breaking down like, here's the products featured in the shoot. Here's the angle that we want. It's a flat lay. We would like this colored background, make sure you have the XYZ props in it. And giving all that to your photographer to work with is super, super helpful.
Yeah. So we're recording this right after a long holiday weekend, and I want to kind of touch a little bit on seasonal campaigns. So with seasonal trends, they heavily influence food marketing. How do you create the timely and relevant campaigns that are specific to seasons and holidays?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to vary from brand to brand, depending on what you're doing. But I'll use the example of, so we work with a cocktail company called Snake Oil Cocktail, and they do cocktails for events. And for them, in the event world, we're working, 3, 4, sometimes in terms of weddings, 6 months to a year ahead of time. And so knowing in the back of your head what's coming up, and again, on the realm of being hyper organized, having that calendar of like, here are, each month, the different things that we need to promote, and then thinking backwards of like, okay, if someone's booking a Christmas party and they want Christmas themed cocktails, when realistically are they going to be making this purchase, and when are they going to start thinking about it, and then trickling that into your marketing in a timely fashion. And then obviously, if we're looking at something like holiday party cocktails, we're probably going to start talking about it right now because people are starting to book those out now. And then as we get closer, we're going to rev up more and more. And then when you're in the actual holiday season, because it's kind of this balancing act with social media, you want to be very timely and relevant from a conversational piece, but you are also at the end of the day trying to sell something, and it's the subtle sell of trying to fold that in the time frame in which someone will make a purchase, but also staying conversational. So it really is, it's a balancing act with social media, and a lot of that can also be done on the back end. And so back to the holiday cocktails. So we'll probably have a post or two go out now, maybe something playful like Christmas in July, because that's kind of fun, and we want to be entertaining and fun in our social media. But then on the back end, we're going to have some targeted ads that are going out to a very specific audience. Sometimes people call these dark posts because they're not going to show up in your feed, but they're going to show up strategically in places of your consumer's feed of who you're trying to reach. And that's where you really want to push heavily for your more sales type posts. You don't really want a lot of that in your traditional feed, but you can put those on the back end in the advertising. And then for each brand it's going to be different. So if you have like a nutrition bar that you're selling, obviously a big thing is going to be revving up to January. That's clean eating, like, so you'll want to start trickling that in early in the holiday season. Then come January, you're full-fledged with your campaign around that seasonal spring clean your diet, let's start fresh in the new year.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point where companies don't want the employees sometimes to see the ads that they're running because of cost per click, right? And so we're trying to dial that in regards to advertising dollars. So if your employees are seeing your advertising, you're paying for that, right? But you want targeted audiences and the demographics that you're going after, which may or may not be your employees, but you don't want to pay for that space to be relevant to them, right? So I think that's key. And then the seasonality of that too, I think working around 52-week matrix, right, a calendar, is a great thing sometimes, as you said, being flexible in that, right? Because something might pop up, a trend might pop up, or some sort of flavor that comes into the element that you need to be aware of and you weren't expecting, and just being fluent in or fluid in terms of their ability to create a great campaign around what's relevant right then and there.
Yeah, and that ties to just developing content in general. I feel like, you want to plan ahead because we all have other things to do. And so we typically try to plan content. We're planning the calendar for the year of our goals and campaigns a year out. But the actual content that's going out every month, ideally you want to create that a month ahead of time and be working always a month ahead. That being said, that content needs to be fluid for that very reason you just brought up, Doug, is that, things are going to come up. You're going to win an award. You're going to have like a new product that you want to announce. Things that are timely will come up. And so having that content be fluid and move it around, and then you can fit in these timely things into that calendar.
And I think the segue to this is really building that authenticity, as you said earlier, around a loyal community and this food brands, wanting to drive that essential audience that is key to strategies. So how do you recommend fostering the genuine connections, right? And again, driving engagement with followers, that's the hardest part, right? You can put content out on any platform, but driving the engagement to share or to like, and so other people see them, and then all of a sudden you start building the social media followers growth.
Yeah. I mean, a good thing to remember is your social media is not a website. It is a dynamic piece of your marketing. And so you're not just going to throw your content up there and walk away and be like, all right, we're done. Yay, we did a good job. It is a conversation that's ongoing, and it's a community, like you said. And so part of that is having that dynamic community, having that conversation, which is ongoing. And so that's going to be making sure you're going on the daily and replying to all those questions that come in a timely fashion, doing that outreach to the people in your community to try and grow and say things that, spark up a conversation. And so finding your people, they'll find you naturally with your posting and with your ads that you're doing, but you also want to have whoever's doing engagement for your channels do that outreach themselves. Who are those people in your community, in your potential customer base that haven't found you yet? Sparking up those conversations with them and getting a dynamic situation going.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I love that. So Rachel, we've loved having you on today, and I want to wrap up with one more question. What is the secret sauce that Shine Blume Creative has to offer to its clients that come on board, and what do you have to offer that's different than what's out there?
Yeah, so I think it really is, we want to act as an extension of your team. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for social media, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And so really when we come in with a company, we want to do a deep dive into what you're doing and really figure out, where should you be? Obviously we could tell you to be on all the platforms and we could have a huge retainer and, that would be great for us, but we don't want to do that. We want our clients to be truly successful, and the trick to that is figuring out where your audience is, where are your time and your money best going to be spent to reach those people, and then really figuring out those dynamic campaigns that are going to resonate with them. And it's something that, we want to be as passionate about your company as you are. I feel like anyone you work with, whether it be an employee or an outside agency, should be able to come to the table with that passion, because that is what is truly going to make for an impactful marketing campaign, because that will shine through in the work that anyone is doing for you in marketing. And we love doing that, and we love helping all size businesses succeed. And so, yeah, that's what we bring to the table.
Well, Rachel, we really appreciate you being here today. And, we had a nice balance of creativity, data-driven insights. And then I think, like you said, the global food brands, they want to approach marketing campaigns with local preferences, micro-influencers, macro-influencers, but they need to do it on the right platform, and then also great strategy behind it. So thank you for having us or being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Right.
And that's a wrap on today's episode with Food Marketing Mindset. I'm Holden Rouse.
And I'm Doug Resch.
And a big thank you to the visionary food marketer who shared their secret sauce with us, Rachel Helmer.
Remember, the world of food marketing is everywhere. It's powerful and it's effective.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this podcast with fellow innovators. For more delicious content, follow us on our social channels and visit our website. Stay tuned for another serving of Food Marketing Mindset, where your appetite for growth meets the taste of triumph. Stay seasoned, stay inspired, until we meet again on the next episode of Food Marketing Mindset.